Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name is Reed Carver. I'm 39, fourth-generation northern driver, and for 8 winters I've run the Tibbitt to Contwoyto Winter Road, the ice highway that leaves the pavement at the end of Highway 4 and strings itself across a chain of lakes and portages to the diamond mines at Lac de Gras. The maps show it as a blue dashed line each winter, then nothing in summer because the road isn't a road. It's a promise we make with cold. If the temperature holds and the water sits still under 2 meters of ice, you can get 63,000 kilos of truck, fuel, and regret to a place that doesn't really exist the rest of the year. If the temperature breaks, the promise breaks. The ice lets you know right away when you've asked too much of it. I drive a Kenworth W900 with an X15 under the hood, an 18-speed Fuller, and a B-train of insulated vans, lead trailer at 28 feet and the pup behind it at 26. We set the rigs up special for winter. Arctic-grade fuel with anti-gel, battery blankets, lines wrapped and extra secured, air dryers purged, wheel end heaters, and skirts removed so nothing traps snow or catches drifts. Engine brakes stay off on the ice, and you learn to love low gears and long patience. I carry spill pads, ice screws, 3 Turfer hand winches with cable, and a steel deadman plate that folds under my bunk. There's a closed cell pad and a bivvy in the passenger locker, plus a Coleman stove, because sometimes you wait on a lake in the dark for a decision to be made 50 kilometers away, and you'd rather stir soup than stir your thoughts. We gathered before dawn at the Winter Road Dispatch just north of Tibbitt Lake. The building is a double-wide with a foreman's office window, a scale shack cradle of radio antennas, and a line of steel drums acting as snow fences in case the wind tries to bury the lot. The mines in a joint venture run the road. Diavik, Ekati, and people who have the money to fix the surface when a loaded truck claws it. The dispatchers, perpetually underslept and allergic to drama, hand out the rules each year. Maintain distances, keep speeds religiously, announce your movement at checkpoints. Don't stop on lakes, don't pass on ice. Check your tires for missing chunks like a dentist checks molars. And if anything sounds wrong in the cab, then it probably is. The convoy wasn't normal. There were 8 of us on the manifest, 4 from my company, Aurora Haulage out of Yellowknife, and 4 contracted owner-ops I'd known since the Mackenzie River barges still ran heavy. We had white paper taped on the van sides with medical relief supplies, stamped in block letters. The fonts didn't match. Someone had rushed the print job. The reefer units on each trailer were idling at 6 degrees Celsius, maintaining warmth, not cold, because outside air would freeze a first aid kit into a brick. The way the ice trembled under each reefer's pulse made me think about heartbeats, and how a heartbeat is just a small engine that means you're not alone. There were 2 additions we never get on the Diamond Run. One was a black Suburban with a short whip antenna riding tail with us, RCMP decals ghosted under road grime. 2 uniformed constables inside wearing the faces cops wear when they know they've been sent to do something vague but important. The other was a woman from the Public Health Agency of Canada named Dr. Mei Lin Song, small enough that she had to step onto the W900's bottom rail to hand me the sealed pallet list through my window. She wore a down parka in government gray and a simple knit cap under her hood, breath coming in clouds as she spoke. "Mr. Carver," she said, eyes on mine, and not the truck, the way people do when they are trying to persuade you to become part of their plan. "Your lead today. We'll space you at 1 minute ahead of the second unit until we hit Mackay. Fuel at Lockhart, quick checks, then straight to Lac de Gras. No unscheduled stops." "I never stop on ice unless the sky is on fire," I said. "Let's keep the sky quiet then," she answered, and I liked her instantly. Inside dispatch, Noor, the day dispatcher, handed out channel assignments and printed rules with the ink still tacky. "You'll call your portages on LADD1 and the mine channel when you hit their cutoffs," he said, tapping his pencil at the frequencies. "Convoy goes as a whole. You'll get one window on Mackay to cross the pressure ridge at the South Bay. The crew has it chained and flagged. Don't bunch. Water wave under the ice doesn't care if you're nervous. Don't break on the ice if you can help it. Let the truck roll and you roll with it." We were supposed to carry masks on our necks now. Every doorway in Yellowknife had a sign with a capital red A over signage that had stacked up across 2 strange years. The radio announcer in town had read the advisories in a careful voice since spring. "Stay home if you feel feverish. Call in from a distance. Avoid close contact. Wear masks in crowded indoor spaces." Most people listened in the beginning. Then some of them got tired of listening. And then the messages got shorter because the stations had lost ad revenue. In the cities to the south, hospitals had filled and emptied and filled again. Up here, we felt mostly distant and careful and lucky, like a ship that sees a storm on the far horizon and checks the lashings just in case. People said the thing in the south wasn't like anything we'd seen before because it didn't act like itself. It didn't roar and crash, it hummed. It didn't shout. It drew people like a generator with the choke stuck wrong. You talk yourself into the strangest explanations when you live north long enough. Wind bent the trees, so maybe sound could bend a person. The reefer temp lights glowed green. My trailer seals were hack tags, not the normal cable locks. The pallets inside, by the manifest, held IV fluids, masks, portable oxygen concentrators, diesel heaters, water purification units, and syringes. There were also several sealed steel drums labeled Regulated Medical Waste Special Handling. I didn't love that, but I've hauled worse. The mines incinerate trash. They can incinerate other things too, if asked. I didn't ask beyond that because sometimes you eat better if you don't go back to the kitchen. Drivers introduced themselves the way we always do, by nodding, offering first names in the town we claim. There was Svetlana Kovalenko, who ran her own freightliner out of Inuvik and had once pulled a stuck parks grader sideways out of a drift with nothing but a shovel, a tow strap, and the force of her disbelief. There was Henry Bird, Dean from Lutzelka, who'd taught his son to drive stick on the ice road in a summer imagination game where the lake was a field. There was Boats Sutherland, who got his CB handle on the barges and never lost it even after they shut down for years at a time. There was a kid named Jamal who'd come up from Peace River, the kind of careful, quiet young driver you want if you're going to hand someone 30 tons in a white world. There were 2 I didn't know by more than a nod, owner-ops with their own lives on their own terms, and there was me, convoy lead. If anything went wrong in front of me, I would meet it first. We rolled at civil twilight, which is a poetic way of saying the sky stopped being black and started admitting it might be blue later. The temperature was minus 32 Celsius, a dry cold that feels like someone telling you a story about warmth. Our engines idled at 800 RPM. I kept the transmission in low range, let the clutch out like a handshake, and the truck came forward with that solemn oath a loaded truck gives when it agrees to go somewhere with you. Out of dispatch, the first lake is Tibbitt, then a short portage over an island in Dome Lake. Then you trace a necklace of ice. Dry geese, mosher, artillery, loaded dog, and the names go strange and then sensible again because people name things with whatever they have left when they reach them. Between lakes, the portages are cut through black spruce and rock. Bulldozed tracks where the ground rises, groomed by equipment with blade marks like corduroy. On the ice, we drive lanes. the road crews flood the lake to thicken the ice. They chain off the shoulders so no one eats the edge. You can see the flood lines like the rings on a tree. You can also see the warps and waves where the ice heaved when the north wind pressed it. When you cross those, your stomach rides the frame rails like you're in a little rowboat beneath a whale. I called each portage on Lat 1, northbound Convoy 1 at portage 12, rolling to 13. The second truck, Sveta, repeated it. Then the next, the call moving like a stitch through the group. RCMP tail called separately when they hit the same points. On the first big lake where the surface tilts toward the outlet, I felt the under ice wave pick up from my front axle and roll out ahead of me. You learn not to stare at the ice directly in front of the bumper because it vibrates. You keep your eyes up and let the speed, 25 kilometers per hour exactly, do its strange magic. Too slow, the wave stands under you and grows. Too fast, and you outrun the strength of the ice. Right is just right. By mid-morning, we were out beyond Gordon. The land gives up trees in scattered lines up here, then stops arguing about it. In summer, you can fly a twin otter in circles and see nothing but water and rock and lichen and sky, a language with 4 words that keep changing meaning. In winter, those 4 words shake hands and agree to become road. The Suburban came up alongside on the first long straight stretch on a lake to look at the convoy, then dropped back. The constable named Gray tapped 2 fingers against his temple when I looked over. I've driven loads that get escorts before. Explosives, oversized gear, packages where the return address is a government acronym. You learn to let the escort be what it is without asking them why they're there. But the paper taped to our vans, medical relief, felt like a sermon directed at the wrong congregation. Out on a winter road where there are no towns and no one to hand things to, relief has to have a destination. Our destination was a mine, with an incinerator and a doctor I'd never seen before. I made a mental note that questions asked at the wrong time are worse than questions not asked at all. At Lockhart Lake, halfway to Lac de Gras, there's a camp with a shop bay, a kitchen that serves stew in bowls you can hold under your chin and steam your beard, and fuel tanks banked in snow like a fort. It's the place we stop for a stamp on our workday in the middle of all that empty. You don't linger in camp because the schedule lives there and the road waits out on the lake. But you see faces, you hear laughter, you hear the rumor mill spin. If something's wrong on the road, the kitchen knows it before the radio does. Today, the camp felt like someone had wrapped it in wool. The diesel generator hummed and the floodlights were on at the fuel island, but there wasn't a cook leaning in the doorway. A piece of paper was taped to the office door with a strip of hockey tape that had been peeled and reused. Hurry in a place where nothing ever hurries. A radio inside the shack played weather reports on a loop. I rolled to the fuel island and nose-stopped where the sign told me to. Big block letters, "Stop here, shut down, grounded nozzles." We never shut down fully at -30 if we can help it. We idle it low and kick the high idle when we pump. The reefer units needed to run no matter what. I flipped to aux heater, kept the cabin temp down to save little things like the steering wheel from feeling sticky, and I stepped out with my gloves on and my fuel card in my teeth. My boots squeaked on the snow the way boots squeak when the snow is dry enough to be honest. No one came right away, so I walked to the office. "Lockhart Fuel, this is Convoy Lead, Aurora 1, I said, hitting the mic by the door. 8 units, medical relief at the pump island. Anyone on? The speaker hissed and then clicked to a recorded voice reading a routine message about road surface conditions between Warburton Bay and Mackay South. Behind that, faintly, I heard something else. A low tone like a battery tender that had gotten bored and started humming a single note to itself. Dr. Song caught up to me quick, breath pluming, clipboard under her arm. "We're in and out," she said. 15 minutes, no more. We need everyone in their cabs or in the shop bay and no one wandering." "That how medicine works now?" asked Boats, half a grin we didn't return. Boats is not a man who hides his skepticism, but he's a man who never lets it drive. He pointed with his chin toward the fuel island. "Should be a body here," he said. "Reggie's usually telling us off or parking an inch too far north." "Maybe he had to step away," I said, but there was no place to step to. Lockhart Camp is a clearing, some steel, lights wired to a pole, and flatness in all directions that swallows footsteps for breakfast. A raven sat on the top of the shop bay door and watched us with its sideways eye. The Suburban idled with a soft, deep note. One of the constables, Gray, stepped out and scanned the clearing with a posture I've seen before. City-trained, fighting a landscape where people don't pop out of alleys. They resolve out of distance. The other constable, Coat, unspooled a little yellow tape without posting it anywhere, then rewound it one-handed. Habit makes people do strange small things when they don't know what big thing to do. Dr. Song pointed at the reefer control head on my lead trailer and confirmed the set point herself. 6 degrees. She tilted her head at the hum from the fuel shack. "You hear it?" she asked. "Like a leftover in a microwave that never stops beeping." I did. A tone in the bone and not the ear. I've heard the ice sing under a heavy load at 40 below. This wasn't that. This was a tone like the one we heard in Yellowknife the night some of the camps closed early, and the flights out ran long and people lined up politely because polite is what Northerners do until they can't. "Stay close," she said. "Everyone, top off and we go." We topped off. The fuel was number 1 diesel, Arctic grade. It pours like rumor at these temperatures, half molasses, half whisper. I grounded the nozzle to the rail on the Kenworth, clipped the chain to the skid plate, and watched the static bleed off like a little lightning you never got to see. The pump clunked, the liquid rose, the smell came up, and the world smelled like it always does when you're about to head deeper: willingness and debt. On the far edge of the lights there was movement. Not the wind stirring snow in streamers. Not a fox stepping sideways to pretend it isn't crossing your road. People, a small number of them in parkas and heavy hoods, the distant bulk and shift of human shapes. They weren't moving quickly, and they weren't moving with any intent I recognized. They walked with the kind of care you see in people who've stood too fast from a hospital bed. Every so often, one would pause and angle their head like they were trying to make out a sound coming from under the ice. The tone strengthened, or the wind brought it to us, or my skull decided to help my ears. Dr. Song looked at the Suburban. Constable Gray had already clocked the shapes. He lifted a hand in a slow back and forth as if asking the air to wait. The shapes kept coming. "Folks," I said on Lady D1, calm as I could, "we've got movement approaching from the lakeside east of the fuel island. Slow, 6 or 7, don't panic. Stay in your units, lock your doors." Sveta answered instantly. "Copy, Reed, see them." Henry echoed her and added, "I'm in my cab, doors shut." Jamal said, "Copy," and you could hear how young he was because his copy sounded like a teacher had asked him to repeat something and he wanted to get it right. The first shape stepped under the floodlight and stopped. A man, maybe 30, wearing a lined Carhartt. His face was bare in the cold. He wasn't well. He didn't cough or stagger dramatically. He didn't do anything you could put a big recording beat to. He stood like the world had gotten too loud, and he had gone out to find the one sound that explained the rest. He turned his head toward the fuel pump, and then toward the Suburban, and finally toward the reefer hum from my trailer. If you've ever dropped a handful of old keys on concrete and watched a curious cat look for the source of the ringing, you know the motion. It would have been funny if the world hadn't been tilting. Another figure behind him. A woman in a white parka belt cinched too tight. Cheeks bright with windburn. Eyes not angry, only far. She paused and then stepped again evenly, like she had a metronome taped in her chest and was trying to sync the universe to it. "You see mouths?" Boats asked on the radio, voice low. "They breathing?" "They're breathing," said Dr. Song. "Keep doors closed." Constable Coate called on his handheld. "RCMP tail to all trucks. Remain in vehicles. This is a fuel area. Do not engage on foot." "I'm on foot," Dr. Song answered, her voice a kind of measured iron I recognized from seasoned nurses and people who've learned to walk toward trouble slowly enough they can still decide to stop. She lifted a small handheld device that chirped and then chirped again in a shorter burst, and I understood that the tone I heard had found a cousin in her pocket. "Park it," I said to her, not an order, a plea. "This isn't for us." "It is today," she said, not unkindly. The first man stepped onto the concrete pad of the fuel island and then he stopped again. The metal must have felt different under his boots. He lowered his head and his hands hung useless, like he'd forgotten the end of a sentence he'd repeated his whole life. When he raised his head, his eyes were wet from cold. He looked like he was about to cry or about to laugh, only neither thing would begin, because the engine singing in his chest didn't know which one matched the tone. The woman clicked the Suburban's public address system and spoke in English and then in French, and then in a Cree dialect I couldn't place, but Henry probably could, because he murmured something back on the radio with the grammar of home in it. "Please return to the edge of the lights," Dr. Song said. "Please wait. We will help you. Please stay where you are." It wasn't the words that mattered. It was the warm tone and the way she knew to keep her own voice from joining the world's hum. They didn't respond, not like people usually respond. They didn't run. They didn't lunge. They didn't do the ghastly cinema things. They stepped toward the hum again, and now 2 of them were near my lead trailer, and one of them reached out the way you reach for a kettle on a stove when you won't admit you don't know whether it's hot. He touched the reefer housing, laid his palm against the panel, and I felt the sound in my chest dip, like a fork you've stopped with your hand. "Reed," Sveta said, a warning and a request. "Don't let them damage the unit." "I have to step down," I said. "Song, May, let me go." "Don't," she said too late because I had the door open and was on the ladder and then on the pad. People tell Southerners stories about northern cold, the instant nose hair freeze, the way metal can burn your skin, the way your breath feels like paper torn inside your throat at -40. The cold isn't theatrical. It's methodical. It subtracts what it wants slowly and leaves what it can't take standing in silence. I stepped onto the pad and the cold was a hand in the small of my back, reminding me that choice is a finite resource. "You all right?" I asked the man at my reefer, keeping my tone the kind of soft you use near a spooked horse. He didn't look at me. He was busy listening to the reefer unit with his hand. I put my gloved palm next to his on the metal. The unit hummed steady. The set point was holding. The cargo had to hold. I didn't want to think yet about what it was. The manifests were tidy lies and useful truth, and sometimes the inverse of both. "Sir," I said, and that got neither of us anywhere. "Buddy," I tried, because up here, buddy isn't a fight word. It's a way to tell someone you'll give them gas out of your can if they misjudge the distance between towns. "It's cold, buddy. Come stand over here out of the wind." He blinked at me. Not angry, not gone. He moved his mouth slightly. The sound that came out wasn't a human word. It wasn't a growl or a moan, or any of the terrible nouns we use when we want to turn people into a problem. It was a kind of tuning, like he was trying different vowels on for fit. He wasn't sick the way my grandmother had been sick when fever took her. He was sick the way a radio is if the dial slips off the station by a little and you keep listening because the song is still there if you're willing to imagine the missing notes. "Reed," Dr. Song said gently near my shoulder. "Back to your cab." One of the figures nearer the Suburban made a short, fast motion that looked like a stumble and ended up being a step onto the bumper. The constable moved too quickly, reached to steady, thought better of touching, and then raised his palms like surrender. People make decisions in these moments that shrink to a single picture in their memory and grow to fill the room in everyone else's. He didn't draw his sidearm. He didn't shout. He said, "Hey there," because sometimes "hey there" is all we have. "Back in," I repeated to myself, and I did something I'm not proud of because I've told it to a dozen rookies never to do. I turned my back on a problem I didn't understand and got into my cab and shut the door and let the sound be outside. If the outside wanted in, I wasn't going to teach it how. "Fuel and go," Noor said on the mine channel when I called the situation in. "Lockhart's staff may be in the shop. We have radio loss at the camp. Proceed north. You'll skip range checks until Blackwater. You'll get a window at Mackay." "What about the people?" Jamal asked, because he still had the habit of asking the right questions out loud. "Don't be a hero," Noor said mildly. "The first rule of Winter Road is, don't add to the problem." We fueled with doors locked. The shapes under the floodlights didn't multiply. They just shifted positions like people in a slow dance you only hear inside your skull. When I eased off the brake and the truck rolled toward the exit, one of them stepped alongside the driver's door and placed a gloved hand against the sheet metal for a moment, as if blessing it. Then he stepped back exactly one pace, no lunge, no grab, eyes on the mirror of the world we'd made for ourselves. Lights, hum, heat managing cold, cold allowing road, road taking people in a direction because people had asked it to. We rolled out of the lights and back onto the lake. The darkness took us in and made our little line of headlights into something a satellite could pick out, but no one else could. If you've never excited a wave under the ice, count yourself lucky. If you have, you know the way it lifts you and drops you, how the front bumper kisses the air a little and the rear axles say a prayer they can't finish. We hit a patch where wind had scoured the ice almost to glass. The studs barely brushed traction into it. Steering felt theoretical. The tracks from the groomers were rope marks in the distance. You steer to the rope marks with the kind of faith people cross oceans on. Half an hour from Lockhart, Henry's voice was too calm. "I'm reading a temp alarm on my pup," he said. "Reefers down to 4. "Mine is holding," I said, checking. 6 declining to 5.7 as the algorithm did its thing. "Mine too," Sveta said, "but it dips when I cross heaves." "Henry, confirm fuel," Dr. Song said. "Confirm unit status light." "Green, but flickering," he answered. "I've got wind across the back end. I can feel it pushing the van." "Don't stop on the ice unless it's trending offset," I said. At 3, we pull off at the next portage shoulder and check the unit. 3.5, Henry said. A minute later, 3. We called the portage, and I took my foot off the throttle so the truck could consider slowing down. It did, carefully, like an old friend offered a new weather. We eased onto the portage shoulder. Fir trees stood wrapped in dry snow like frozen fireworks. I stepped down into snowpack that squeaked again, and my breath froze into a little cloud and hovered and then disappeared. I went back to Henry's pup, where the unit hummed, but a different hummed. The glow from the control head looked the way a person looks when they're about to say "I'm fine" and then sit on a curb. The infected, if that's what we were calling them, and I've never been sure that word is anything but a declaration, didn't appear out here. No one appears out here unless an airplane puts them down or their truck dies. The trees stood and watched and said nothing. I opened the reefer's small service panel with a gloved finger, tilted it down, and peered into the dim. I don't do my own refrigeration work. That's a trade like any other with its own school of patience, but I can check a fuse and I can listen to a belt. The belt sang in the wrong key. The unit was choking on its own cold. I closed the panel and patted the sheet metal like a patient horse. "You're asking the world to be something it's not," I said. "What?" Henry asked. "Talking to your reefer?" Sveta said. "Good sign, means we're still north." Dr. Song climbed the ladder on the side of Henry's lead van and peered through the little light into a viewing port most people never know is there. She watched without speaking for a slow count of 20, then climbed down. She's not a big person, but she moved with marine economy, the kind people develop on boats and in hospitals, both places where you learn quickly how to put every foot and every word where it will do the least harm. "I need you all to hear something," she said. "The pallets marked medical relief are exactly what they say they are. Masks, IV fluids, small concentrators, the kind of things that make communities a little safer even when big answers don't arrive. We have another category of cargo in this convoy. The steel drums are not relief. They are sealed, regulated waste from a cluster of clinics that were shut down in a hurry when staff got sick. They're not samples. They're not live material. They're waste. A terrible, ugly word for things that need to be made into something else so the world is safer. The mines have incinerators. Incinerators run hot. The drums need to get to a fire that can change them. That's why we go north and not south today. We're taking harm away from places where too many people stand close to each other, and we're taking it to a place where no one stands close. I am telling you this because if we get pressed by weather or by people, I need to know that you will not make a choice that puts those drums anywhere but in the fire." A long silence lived on the portage. The trees kept their counsel. The engines idled. "No one is asking us to move dynamite by calling it diapers, right?" Boats said finally. "No," she said. "They're asking you to move awkward truth by calling it something no one will protest. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's how people behave when they are trying to keep peace in rooms full of fear." "Do I have a choice?" I asked her. "You always do," she said, not softening it, not making it seem like something else. "I'm telling you what we are carrying so that when choice arrives, you won't be surprised." We eased back onto the lake. Henry's reefer stabilized for a while, then wandered, then recovered. When gear fails at -30, you learn to watch it with the kind of attention you might give a sleeping child who coughed twice. We ran distances so precise you could measure them with a watch. We called portage like we were carving a spoon from a piece of green wood, slow, steady, pressure exactly where it belongs and nowhere else. Noon came and went without a sun you could brag about. The sky is a slate here that has written on itself so often that it's learned to fade its own words. On the south bay of Mackay Lake, a pressure ridge had formed 2 days earlier. The crew had augured holes, laid timbers and chain, cut a channel to make the ride gentler, then flagged it with bundles and bamboo. You don't fix a pressure ridge, you learn to ask its permission. We called in and got our window, one truck at a time at 15, centered on the cut. I went first. The truck's front tires stepped down into the small sag, then up, the under ice wave running ahead to the far shore. You learn to love the physics of it when you have no other choice. How the mass rides the flex, how the ice wants to hold and needs your help to remember how. The reefer hummed. The steel drums inside hummed with it. A hum I felt in my fingers more than I heard with my ears. The truck climbed the far side of the cut and the sound changed under my boots, the tone of ice to the tone of portage, and I let a breath go I didn't know I'd been holding. Sveta followed, then boats, and then Jamal. When Jamal hit the bottom of the cut, He lifted off the throttle a fraction, just enough that the wave under him got curious. The trailer hopped on the far side like a whale had shrugged under it. He did everything right in the next second, didn't brake, didn't steer, didn't fight, and the rig settled and the wave ran free. "Nice," I said on radio, because you praised the right reflex, not the lucky outcome. "You did that with your hands and not your eyes. Remember that feeling?" "I kind of don't want to," he said, and everyone laughed in a low exhale that emptied us out a little. Between Mackay and Warburton Bay, the wind set down, and the world went quiet in a way that made me think the ice had leaned its head against the lakeshore and fallen asleep. In that kind of quiet, you can hear your own wires hum. That's how it was when Sveta said, "I've got company. Say again." Snow shapes at 12 o'clock, not truck, people. We were on a long reach of lake, no camps, no flagged pullouts, nothing but wind-scoured ice and the promise of a portage somewhere to the north. The people were small in the distance, then not small at all. They walked straight toward us along the line of our own tracks, like the road was a thread they'd picked up and now followed back to the needle. "Keep rolling," Noor said on the mine channel, a voice that knew what it was asking. "Do not stop." "Copy," I said, but I also said, "May?" "We can't stop in the open," she said. "If we must stop, stop on a portage. They're less drawn to trees." Henry laughed once, startled at his own brain for making a joke inside a problem. People relieve pressure with humor because pressure will leave humans one way or another. If it leaves as noise, laughter, muttered curses if you're a different kind of person, it comes back to you slower. We rolled. The shapes rolled. They weren't running. I've never seen one of them run, not the way running is in my vocabulary. But their pace made our 25 look like a conversation no one was allowed to interrupt. They angled not toward my cab or my engine, but toward the reefer unit again. Big sound, constant sound. The tone under the tone. They stepped aside to let the truck pass by because the truck's hum wasn't their note. The reefer was. Two of them reached toward the pup reefer as it went by me, both hands out, like they were warming their fingers over a stove that burned with a music nobody else could hear. "I don't like this," Boat said. "Me either," I said. "But we can choose our dislike later. Keep going." The Suburban drifted toward the outer edge of the convoy, then tucked back. A herding dog that had learned the sheep obeyed one another more than any bark. The constables didn't try the loudspeaker this time. May didn't either. Their silence was strategic. All noise right then had consequences no one could calculate. We hit the next portage. I called it. We climbed into the trees and the trees didn't help. Two figures stepped out of the spruce at the edge of the path. Not rushed, not frantic, calm, drawn. That word again. Drawn to the thing that wasn't the truck, and wasn't the men, and wasn't the woman in the Suburban asking them in a language older than radios to please stop. They stepped to the shoulder and put hands on the sheet metal panel of the reefer unit like parishioners touching a shrine. The panel took the weight. The sound changed. "Reed," Sveta said. "Look at your temp." It had dropped. Not a failure drop, no alarm, but a half degree that was stubborn and then was a degree. The compressor pulsed to correct. The set point was still 6 and the unit was trying to hold it in the face of extra attention it had never been designed to receive. The hands on the panel didn't dent, didn't scratch. They simply added their own cold to the outside and forced the inside to work harder and our fuel to move from tanks to sky faster than any of us wanted. "Keep rolling," I said, because words are cheap and momentum is not. The road ahead hit the long shoulder of Mackay North. The sky unfurled a light I call cobalt because no one has given it a better name. Blue with dignity. The horizon gathered itself into a line so straight you could rest your spirit on it. The lake ran flat and silent, and I felt, for the briefest of seconds, like the world had reasserted its logic. Then Henry, too calm again, said, "I'm bogging." "Say again." "Slush crossing, thin snow over it, steering went soft. Torque steps wrong, rear pup is dragging." "Don't stop," I said. Then, in the same breath, "We're stopping. May, tell me if this will make your day worse. I'm going to pull him through." "We can't stop on slush," she said. "If you stop on slush, you make more of it." "I know." I eased ahead of Henry, pulled the W900 a half lane aside, then set my speed exactly at 20. The number I learned years ago when a grader operator watched an old hand pull a stuck van out of a shallow bog without breaking the surface tension of anything. The world occasionally allows you one kind of magic if you return it immediately. I dropped my A-trailer's speed a hair more, let the strap of distance lengthen and then shorten as the wave under the ice steadied. "Hook to my pintle," I said. "Don't touch your brakes. Don't touch your clutch. When you feel my pull, let the wheel think it was your idea." "I don't like this," Boat said again. And I didn't either, but liking was a luxury and we hadn't packed any. It's hard to describe how it feels when a 60,000-kilo solution becomes partly your responsibility and partly the lake's. The geometry in my head drew itself with chalk on a board that felt like it was on the back of a pickup I was trying to steer. Henry's pup crept up out of the slush pan, then found firmer wind-packed snow, then rolled true. In my mirror, one of the people had stepped close enough to tap his glove on the pup's reefer housing. I didn't shout anything. I let the convoy pull forward again, and I let the problem be behind us where its voice gets smaller. We made Blackwater and then the turn for Lac de Gras in a kind of exhausted discipline that is the closest thing I have to prayer. Radio calls, portage numbers, the mine's frequency at the last checkpoint, the Suburban lagging, then catching up, the constables making choices inside their own courage. At the Lac de Gras turnoff, there's a sign the road crew welds out of scrap every year. A little plate with an arrow and the mine's name painted in white. The wind turns it on its post like it's trying to make it into a weather vane. The mines run their own little worlds deep in winter. They become towns with kitchens and bays and gyms and notice boards covered in jokes only miners understand. They got their notice boards too full this month with notices that sounded like exchanges between people who knew each other's kids. Please stay in your rooms. Please call health if you feel unwell. Please don't stand in groups in the hallway. We are all in this together. They were ready to be a town. They weren't ready to be a hospital. No one is who hasn't decided to be ahead of time. The mine security gate sat on a portage in a cluster of willows. A loader bucket blocked half the lane. The security guard wore a parka with the mine logo and a mask that made his eyes look like he'd been surprised right after the picture was taken, and no one told him he could stop being surprised. "You took your time," he said into his radio. "We didn't," I said into mine, which is the kind of joke that has no humor and still works. We climbed the gentle grade and the world turned from built on ice to built on rock again. The camp spread under low cloud like a tidy idea. The stack for the incinerator glowed faint, the way it always does, a hint of heat at the top where heat leaves the only way heat can. The mine roads are gravel even in winter, salted and sanded because people have to walk on them. That fact hit me like a kindness. People had to walk somewhere after we left the world of driving. On the pad near the incinerator building, there was movement the wrong kind. Not frantic, not disordered. The same not something I'd seen at Lockhart, only now in the heart of a place where all motion is meant to have purpose and PPE is meant to know its part. 4 figures stood evenly spaced along the building's wall, backs to the sheet metal, faces tilted like they were listening through it. Not employees on a smoke break, not patients climbing a hill, not visitors admiring the lights of a place no tourist comes to. They were listening to a sound only they could hear, and the sound was coming from the incinerator's idle fans, and the reefer hum multiplied by 8 coming up the hill. The security guard at the gate took one step to the left, like he meant to run for the door lever to drop the barrier, and then didn't. He looked at me the way people look at drivers when drivers arrive with something that, if misplaced, will become a prayer and a headline. "We need you at Bay 3, he said. "You can't park long. We can't let you gather at the door." "We're not here to gather," I said. "We're here to be less than we were." "Fine," he said. "That I can work with." The Suburban rolled in after us and parked at an angle anyone who's ever been afraid recognizes. The constables looked like people who had read a manual for a situation and discovered it came with a different tool set than the one in their trunk. May looked like the manual and the trunk were problems for later. She pointed to a white door with a big handle and a badge reader. "We have to get the drums in first," she said. "Then relief pallets to the health bay." "You dump drums, stoke the fire, and explain later," Boat said. "We don't dump," she said. "We stage. We check seals. We incinerate by procedure. The world is terrible and the world is careful at the same time. That's how we keep going." We backed to the bay with the old dance, spotter's hands, driver's mirrors, trailer's will. I kissed the dock and set the brake and chalked a wheel because I wasn't about to trust anything to one system when 3 would do better. The dock roll-up door rose. In the light stood 3 people with masks and thick aprons and a posture that said this would be done right. I broke my seal with a pair of cutters that felt heavier than they should. The reefer's breath sighed out like a dog at the end of a walk. We opened the van, and the air inside pressed forward with a gentle conviction. It smelled like plastic and expectation. The steel drums were there at the nose, banded, clean, red label stark on silver. May climbed the ladder and read the production numbers to a man with a clipboard. He checked them off like a prayer bead count. 2 of the mine workers moved the drums with a pallet jack that squeaked a different note for each turn of a wheel. My throat hurt from breathing cold air and from not letting the things I wanted to say turn into a sound the wrong people might hear. "Reed," Sveta said. "We've got movement at the edge of the pad." I looked. The figures along the incinerator wall were still even and upright. They were not interested in us. They were interested in the fan that thrummed a note your fingers could trace in the air if you didn't mind never getting the oil off. 2 more figures came out from the shadow near the oxygen shed and took up positions like chess pieces moved by a distracted god. Even spacing, like always, at arcs along the building where the sound hit their ears just so. The first drum went into the building. Doors inside closed. The second drum followed. The man with the clipboard spoke into a radio and nodded when a voice answered. The mine runs on checklists. The mine runs because the checklists work. People sometimes tell you checklists crush creativity. People who have never seen a loader's bucket fall in the wrong place say that. At -30, creativity is overrated and procedure is art. We staged in that rhythm. Drums inside, door, pause. Paperwork that will be unread a month from now and still matters because it gives your hands something to do while your head is inventing emergencies. At the 5th drum, one of the figures at the wall lifted a hand and placed it on the sheet metal with a palm spread. It looked like a person making a promise to a building. The building hummed in answer. "How long do we have?" I asked May, because if fear was going to inhabit me, I wanted it to be busy with something useful like counting. 2 hours to burn the drums, she said. Another 2 to run the relief pallets to the health bay. Less if we can get a loader operator to help. They sent most of their people to rooms. They don't want anyone walking outside if they don't have to. Good policy, I said. And then, because rules are complicated, I left my truck again. I walked around to my pup's reefer control panel, and I did something I hadn't told anyone I was thinking about since Lockhart, because sometimes you owe the world the courage to make a small change without convening a meeting. I dropped the set point from 6 to 4 degrees for a minute. The compressor thumped in, the hum rose in pitch, and the figures at the wall faltered a fraction. Then I raised it to 8 degrees. The compressor eased, the hum lowered, and the figures corrected again. They didn't swing, didn't startle. They adjusted the way you do when you're trying to follow a note and someone plays a chord next to you. I did it one more time and then left it where it belonged. "What was that?" Sveta asked, of course, because she watches everything the way people who have had to shovel themselves out watch weather. "An experiment," I said. "Don't run too many of those," she said. "I got one left in me today," I answered, and didn't say the quiet part. The experiment I had in mind wasn't about a reefer unit. It was about a B train. We moved the drums, all of them, slow and right. The incinerator building smelled like a scrapyard, and a hospital went on a date and decided they liked each other's work ethic. The mine man with the clipboard looked like he wanted to hug every one of us and didn't because he was good at his job. The relief pallets were a joy after the drums. Boxes of portable oxygen concentrators, shrink-wrapped until they looked like Christmas. Stacks of masks and face shields that would give people the smallest sense of being able to do something. IV fluid bags packaged in crates with plastic liners that crackle like the good potato chip bags. Sometimes you haul rebar and your soul feels heavier. Sometimes you haul a sign that reminds you people can be decent. While the loader operator was on break, because loaders also have schedules and this place ran on schedules like they were oxygen, I stepped to where the Suburban idled and asked the constables a question I hadn't let myself ask. "You two okay?" I said, because I believe in starting at the point where the other person can answer without having to lie. "We will be if we see this leave," Constable Gray said, and pointed at my pup trailer with his chin the way men do when their hands are tired. "There's a tracker on your pup in the reefer housing. His boss told him," he said, pointing at Coat with his thumb, "that we were to watch it get to the mine. We weren't told why. This is not normal for us." "It's not normal for us either," I said. And that was the truest thing I'd said all day. "You have people out there," Coat said. "On the way back?" "Yes. They'll be better if you don't come back for a few hours." "I know." The last of the relief pallets came off my lead van and went into a door with a sign that said Health Bay, that in any other year would have been funny in a dad joke way, and today made my throat hurt again. I closed up the van and looked at the pup. The temp held. The hum was still an answer to a question the infected had forgotten how to ask. "They'll follow the note," May said, standing beside me and not pretending to be anywhere else. "They don't choose like we do. They want it steady. When the note stops, they find another one." "Dr. Song," I said, "what happens if the note moves?" She looked at me a long second. "It moves." I walked to the dolly between my lead trailer and the pup, and I set the brakes and I pulled the air lines. Glad hands off the sockets with a twist down and forward to keep the rubber from cracking. I unplugged the pigtail, sealed the ends, and stowed the lines the way you do when you mean to pick them up again. I pulled the pin and eased forward an inch to take pressure off the fifth wheel latch on the lead's tail. The pup settled with its landing gear on dry gravel, blessed by a grater last week. The cold made the metal sound delicate. The landing gear held. "Reed," Sveta said on the radio, "no." "It's a lure," I said. "It's become a lure whether we like it or not. I want the lure to be somewhere I say." "Where?" Boat said, knowing and hating that he already understood. "Out on the lake," I said. "On the far edge." Somewhere no one walks unless they know what they're walking on. You're going to leave a reefer running in the open at night in winter. I am, I said. Who taught you that trick? Boats asked, not actually curious. The people who taught me to leave a truck idling if I walk back a kilometer with a tow strap, I said. Because the world is full of wrong ideas that become right if you choose the smaller wrong. You could shut it off, he said softly. If we shut them off here, the sound is the incinerator. If the sound is the incinerator, those folks do what they're already doing and stand nice, and even beside a building we need to keep standing. If we shut the reefer off on the lake, we might wind up with people standing nice, and even somewhere the wind will pick them soon and carry them. I don't like any of the choices, Boats. May didn't speak for a long time. They will follow the note, she said again. If the note moves away from the buildings, they will go with it. It won't make them well. It will make us less likely to make them worse. I got in the W900 and I pulled ahead with the lead only. I circled the pad in a slow arc and backed again to kiss the pup with my pintle on the front bumper where you'd hang a plow in the south. I ran a short strap between the pintle and the pup's toe eye, a little cheat we use in yards to move a trailer without fussing with dolly geometry. I eased forward until the strap went taut. The note the reefer made changed a fraction with the strain, and every head along the incinerator wall turned a fraction too. I don't like to be a conductor when the orchestra hasn't agreed to play, but today we were all learning new instruments. I hauled my pup, the lure, out of the yard and down the access road to the lake. The security guard at the gate didn't say no. He lifted the barrier and looked away like he was choosing the kind of person he would be in the retelling. The Suburban followed me out to the edge, then stopped on the gravel, the constables' faces behind glass as flat as the world outside. I took the pup 50 meters onto the lake along a lane that wasn't ours, set the landing gear, pulled the strap, and let it sit alone in the low light like a phone on a table ringing silently. The reefer ran. The hum went out across the ice and came back to itself like a two-person choir. It took 5 minutes for the first figure to find the note. He stood at the water's edge and then he stepped onto the ice. He didn't test it. He walked evenly and careful, the way you do when you've decided that ground is a promise everywhere. He put his palm out and laid it on the reefer housing, and I had to look away because sometimes you want to tell a person who isn't themselves not to trust the world, and you can't because the world isn't listening either. Another figure followed, then 3 more. They stood spaced along the pup like stones laid to make a path. The cold was doing its work the way it always does, and I felt ugly for letting it. Then I remembered the steel drums and the incinerator and the relief pallets and the 4 figures along the building wall, and I felt uglier for thinking there was a way to feel better. "We should go," May said. Her voice had an ache in it I hadn't heard since Yellowknife, when the plane with the pale blue tail had taken off with people who wanted to go home and didn't know where that was anymore. "We should go," I echoed. "It's easy to repeat orders that agree with you." We went back to camp. We loaded down again, empty drums for return, broken pallets, the kind of trash that feels like a relief because it's only trash. We ate stew that someone had left in a warmer with a timer and a sign that said, "Please cover your bowl," and we covered our bowls because rules matter. We talked in low voices about who we were going to be if the world stayed like this longer than one convoy. On the return south, we had weather. Wind streaking snow sideways and polishing the lakes into mirrors. The convoy ran with hazard lights hooded because you don't need more glow. We called portages and felt the wave under our boots and didn't ask whether the pup on the lake was still singing. The Suburban fell behind on one stretch and then didn't return. Later, we learned they'd stopped at Lockhart to help a camp worker walk from the diesel shed to the shop in a set of perfect, even steps that looked like a person walking down the aisle of a church. At Mackay, we had a second ridge, a meaner one. The crew had marked a new cut. We crossed with the same prayers. The ice groaned. The truck answered, the world held. At Blackwater, the wind dropped. Noor's voice came thin from Yellowknife. "How many?" "All," I said. And for once the lie was kinder than the truth, and the truth was not a number. By the time we came back across Dome and saw the faint warm orange above the tree line where Yellowknife shows you it is a place with lamps, the reefer hum in my chest had quieted enough that I felt like my pulse might belong to me again. We put the trucks in a line at dispatch and let the engines idle and climbed down onto gravel that felt like a continent. The cold had less knife in it this close to town. People were out there in it. Lights in the houses. Someone in the window of the cafe, wiping with a cloth in circles. The familiar friction of a town wearing down a day. We turned in our paperwork and our keys. We rubbed our faces with hands we didn't bother to take gloves off for. We promised to drink water and didn't. That's how drivers are. And then we stood with May by the edge of the lot. "You did something ugly and kind," she said to me. "I don't need someone to put those two words together for me," I said. "I already did." "Then I'll put another pair together," she said. "Necessary and temporary." "Temporary," I said, tasting it and deciding not to argue with Hope. "Go home," she said. "Sleep if you can. There'll be more runs." "There always are," Boat said. And I didn't know whether he meant roads or choices or the ways people find to pull together and pull apart at the same time. Sveta put a gloved hand on my arm. "You never asked why I came across this year," she said. "I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to," I said. "My grandmother used to say the North looks after the people who don't say out loud that they want to be looked after," she said. "It hears things without being told. That's not science. That's what women say in kitchens when the radio's on and the soup is good. I came because something asked me to. Today I heard it ask you too. You did what you could." "I left a thing on the lake that will call people until it stops," I said. "You left a note where it would cause the least damage," she said. "People hear notes and they move. Sometimes away from a building with fire inside that needs to run without hands on it. Sometimes toward a light that means food. We're not writing the music, Reed. We're only playing along until someone smarter than us finds a way to change the tune." "I don't like being a bandmate," I said. "No one does," she said, with a smile that did not make light. On my way out past Detta, I slowed for the old airport road light out of habit, even though the late hour had the green waiting for me. Beyond, the Detta ice road stretched smooth in the glow. The lake there makes its own version of quiet. I pulled to the shoulder and shut my lights off for a minute and let the darkness have me. The note that had followed me all day threaded through the silence, diminished, echoed, then finally didn't. What remained was a thinner sound I recognized from my own chest after a long run. The small, honest work of staying alive. I went home and slept in a room that smelled like cedar and dust and boots. I dreamed about the incinerator's fan and the reefer's breath, and the way people stood in even lines like fence posts at the edge of a field. You can't forget a day like that. You fold it. You put it on a shelf. You hope you don't have to take it down for a while. If you do, you hope the person next to you will help unfold it without tearing the corners off. We went north again 2 days later. Another convoy, another set of pallets pretending one thing so another thing could happen without a fight. The weather had changed, and the ridge at Mackay had moved, and the world had the audacity to be new. At Lockhart, Reggie was back at the island, scolding with gentleness and refilling cups and pointing once with his chin toward a pair of mitts on a hook that weren't his. "Somebody left those," he said. "I'll hang on to them until they come back and ask." On the way out, I asked May if anyone had gone to the lake to shut the reefer down. She nodded. "They did," she said. "The wind came up. The note carried farther and then not as far. People moved, they always do. We're going to keep putting notes where they make less hurt and more help until someone smart changes the song. That might take a while, I said. I have time, she said. So do you. I don't know about that, I said, thinking of my father who had died in a spring when breakup came early and a barge read the river wrong. Time isn't a promise. It's a trucker's estimate at the beginning of a run. You have enough, she said. Enough to keep choosing. That's all any of us get. That night, passing the turnoff for the Portage 53 with the wind easing and the sky showing a smear of green aurora like paint rubbed off a board, the reefer hummed steady. In the mirror, the convoy lights made a long string like people walking home with candles cupped in their hands. We did not mention what we had left on the lake and then taken away again. We mentioned the ridge we would cross and the stew we would eat, and the fact that Jamal had remembered to keep his engine brake off like an old hand. We mentioned the things that make a road pass under you without braking. Sometime around midnight, a twin otter crossed low, nose pointed toward a mining strip. Navigation lights soft, engines making a note I had known since I was a kid who lay on a snowbank and watched planes like bright fish passing an upside-down sea. The plane's tone braided with the reefer tones and the generator tones and the tones in the skulls of people who had stood too close to a wrong sound for too long. A song needs harmony. The world has one, whether we like the melody or not. I don't know how the story ending fits in a tidy place. I know we delivered. I know we burned what needed burning. I know relief went to rooms where people breathed easier because a machine borrowed breath from the air and gave it back to them a little cleaner. I know that the next week the Suburban didn't come, and the week after that, 2 came. And the week after that, no escort came at all, because the people who sent escorts had run out of people to send. I know that buses ran from town to town with paper signs in their windows that said family or medical, and people sat on them quietly as if they'd all been told the same confusing joke. I know that at least once, when the wind got still and the cold got mean, I heard a note on a lake that made a person lift his head and walk toward it, and I turned my truck off for a minute and listened with him, because you owe people that, even when you won't let them touch the panel. We keep driving. It's what we do. North in winter, when the water is hard. South in spring, when the road becomes a story you tell your summer friends. The places we drive to aren't places you can live. They're places the rest of the world uses to make sense of a different set of math. Mines, camps, range roads. The names on the signboards pass under the bumper and then evaporate. The only permanent thing on a winter road is the decision to trust the ice when it tells you it can carry you if you help it a little. The only permanent thing in a winter like this is the decision to trust one another when someone says, "Don't stop here," and someone else says, "We can't leave them there," and someone else says, "We can make the note move." I still keep the keys on the paracord. I still listen for rattles that might mean the ice is listening back. When I climb down on nights so cold the stars feel like they might break if I look at them wrong, I press my palm against the reefer panel the way those people did. Not because I think it will sing me to a place I can't choose. Because I want to remember the hum is the sound of a promise being kept. A set point holding, a temperature staying steady, a duty carried to a place where it becomes less dangerous to everyone. In a winter of ugly kindness and necessary temporary, sometimes the most human sound is a machine doing what it said it would. We cross Mackay. We call Warburton. We ease past Lockhart. We keep the distances. We keep the speed. We don't stop on the lakes, and we don't stand too long in the road outside a warm door. We live by rules someone wrote after a worse night than ours. We live because enemies as old as cold and as new as a note inside a skull know how to make us forget who we are, and we choose differently and then choose again. When the convoy hums in the darkness, a straight line of drivers and freight and all the decisions between the start and the end, you can almost believe the ice has decided to trust us back. and you drive gently enough to deserve it. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.